Hello, welcome to the latest edition of the OSU Sports Extra podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined by our new OSU lead writer, Dean Ruhl. Dean, you and I talked quite a bit on the Preps podcast. Now we're going to get to talk about OSU football a little bit. So good to be with you. It's cold. There's snow on the ground. So you're safely in Stillwater. I'm in Tulsa. Let's start with the transfer portal. Transfer portal, it just seems like there's news almost just constantly flowing in and out. But of the players that OSU has gotten, who intrigues you the most so far?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's kind of hard to get a read. This is now kind of almost season 3 with the transfer portal in college athletics, and it's hard to get a read on how OSU exactly likes to go through with all this because it seems to change every offseason. Last year, maybe not so much active. This year, very active to begin. This is something I didn't think would really pick up until after they got through their bowl game, but they're swinging for the fences right now. And there's 3 guys that I really like in this transfer class that I think could be super beneficial for OSU going forward. Patrick, one of them because he's a local guy, University of Tulsa, Anthony Goodlow, or TU, excuse me. I'm still getting used to the vernacular. I know I'm an outsider to it. But
hey, at least you caught yourself though. That's important. I
did. I always got to be careful with that. But Anthony Goodlow, big defensive lineman. 24/7 Sports regraded him as a 4-star. So I think he's an interesting guy to be looking at in a position of need. That D line is going to look completely different compared to what it did this year. You also have Dalton Cooper, an offensive tackle out of Texas State, big guy, 6'7", 280 is what he's listed at. Had all conference records or all kind of accolades this year. So he's another one I think. Because I think what OSU really wants to do with this transfer class is you want to bring in guys immediate impact and guys who can just immediately slot into that spot and try to really shore up these absences they're going to have this offseason. And then what I think is probably the most intriguing is Sean Tyler, a running back from Western Michigan. He's a more experienced guy. They just lost their starter. Not only did they lose their starter, they lost a couple depth pieces, depending on how you want to view Braylon, depending on how you want to view Dominic leaving. That running back room's a little empty right now, and you bring in this guy who's got experience, who's shown to have success. I'm interested to see what he did. I think he could maybe have a little bit of a Jalen Warren-esque kind of arc with OSU, where you come from that smaller, Jalen Warren, he came from Utah State. Sean Tyler's coming from Western Michigan. I think these guys are, again, just plug and play. He could maybe be 1,000-yard rusher next year, and I think OSU would be happy with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you consider, Dean, the losses in the transfer portal for OSU versus who they've gained in the portal, just talking portal guys, we'll get to the recruiting class in a bit, but are they in this game of transfer portal, are they at a net gain or a net loss, do you feel, in terms of players?
I think right now, as we look at this on December 22nd, we're still dealing with a net loss because let's think about who OSU exactly did lose. You lost your 4-year starting quarterback, Spencer Sanders. That's going to be a hard thing to replace. And I know that there's quarterback talent on that roster and coming into that roster as of yesterday. Who knows if they're still swinging for the fences trying to get a transfer quarterback? I would assume they're at least looking into it. Who knows if they actually pull the trigger there? But that's going to be a big loss. Losing your leading tackler, Mason Cobb, that's going to be a big loss. So I think OSU has more big losses than they do have big gains, but a lot of that can change. We still have 8 months until this season starts, and I don't think they're quite done in this transfer portal, in this transfer cycle. But right now, I still think we're dealing with a net loss when we talk about OSU. How that changes in the future, I'd be interested to see because it seems like OSU has no signs of letting up on getting these transfer commitments.
Well, and that's a good point, Dean. And it's 10:15 on Thursday morning. it could change by noon today.
Yeah.
I mean, you just, and I wonder if we're going to get this post signing day activity, from the port now that, people have signed and, you kind of know where the openings are to a degree. Is there going to be, are people going to see, oh, I can go there or whatever? There could be this kind of post signing day activity in the portal, but like you said, I mean, it's changing. It's just crazy. It's the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah, I think it's something that nobody really knows how to. I think in college athletics, everybody likes to look forward, and nobody knows how to look forward with the transfer portal and try to figure out what the trend is and how this is all going to look, even in 3 years from now. And so I think it's kind of just everybody's going with what they feels right at the right moment. And this is a season I think OSU says, let's go get that experience. Let's go get that guy, even though maybe they only have a year or two of eligibility left. Let's go get them. Let's get some immediate play, because everybody forgets, Patrick, OSU's 12-2 season in 2021 was built on a lot of transfer success. And so I think, not that they're necessarily going to try to recreate that, but I think they saw we had success when we did it at first. Let's do it again and see what happens.
So let's talk about this year's recruiting class a little bit. Yesterday was the early signing period, or the beginning of the early signing period. Ladarius Webb kind of intrigues me. Why don't you talk about him for a minute?
Yeah, he's a very interesting little prospect here. Obviously, he's the son, former Baltimore Ravens. I think he bounced around to a couple other NFL teams, but cornerback Ladarius Webb. And he's out of JUCO. So I think, once again, we can, just how we talked about with the transfers, he's somebody you can kind of bring in. He's got that experience. He's got the age. He's got the talent. He's got kind of everything you want for an immediate impact player. And I think that really is something that the Cowboys liked, because, once again, this secondary kind of got eaten up by the transfer portal, just like it did last year when you had Jark Bernard-Converse and Tanner McAllister. Both of them transfer out, and you had Trey Sterling ran out of eligibility. Now you're going to have this year no Thomas Harper, no Jabbar Muhammad. Your depth pieces of Kenyon Williams and DeMarco Jones are all gone. So with this secondary kind of going to have a new look again, like a couple other positions on this team next year, he's a guy that I think really has kind of the intangibles you'd want for somebody to come in and have an immediate start, and you can trust them. The other thing that he's got is OSU lists him as a hybrid. He's not a cornerback. He's not a safety. He can play both. And this is something that Mike Gundy talked about yesterday. He's a guy that they would feel comfortable putting at any of those positions in the secondary. And so I think he's just a really intriguing option, and he's going to be able to have now 8 months in that program in the offseason to figure it out. And I think you could see him really play a big role in that defensive back grouping next year.
So only 2 in-state guys. Let's kind of break down each one just for a second. Jacoby Sanders at Stillwater High School kind of fills a need on the offensive line. What do you make of him?
Big kid. I mean, even I covered, coming off the prep beat, I had covered 4 Stillwater games this year, and each time he just stuck out for his size. Another interesting thing about him, I mean, there's family ties to OSU. His grandfather was the fullback for Terry Miller. So he was blocking Terry Miller, and now Terry Miller's in the College Football Hall of Fame. So there's family ties there. He told me that it was OSU from day one is where he wanted to be, because of all that. Obviously, he's the center for both of Mike Gundy's sons. So I think even Gundy said it yesterday that kid's been over at my house more than I can count, just because he's hanging out with Gage Gundy. So I know, and Jacoby told me that, and so I think that was an easy recruit, a place that Jacoby wanted to be, and it all just worked out there. The more interesting one, I think, is Jaden Foreman from Del City. He wanted to play basketball until like his sophomore year in high school. He saw himself as a basketball guy, and now he's one of the state's best. He's a really strong guy. They list him at 250, Patrick. I don't know if I believe that. He seems a lot bigger than that. But regardless, talking with Mike, he spoke to Jaden's toughness yesterday. He said they want to get him even around the 280 range. They said he's a raw product that they want to get in with Rob Glass and really work on. And so I'd be interested on that D line, whether they want to put him D end, maybe move him over to the nose. I doubt they would do that. I think they'd probably keep him on the end, but I think he's a really versatile guy that can make a difference there. And technically, Patrick, we do have one more, but it is a JUCO. So however we want to look at, he's in state or he's not. But I'm in Oates. He went to Edison High School, but he just spent the past 2 years at Northeastern Oklahoma A&M. He technically is, if we want to call him an in-state, however you want to look at that. But he's on the D-line as well, and another big body. He's listed at 305 pounds, so he's more of your nose tackle. He might be a guy that OSU really does like in that immediate impact area, just because of the age and experience and the size already on him.
Yeah. So going back to Jacoby Sanders for a second, it's tough to get, an offensive lineman playing time in year one. And Gundy's talked about that a lot over the years, that ideally you don't want to play freshman offensive linemen. But having said that, do you see maybe Sanders getting some early playing time, or do you think he will be a likely redshirt candidate?
I don't want to put him in the red shirt. I don't think he would start, but when I spoke with him, I said, what's been the message from them on that first year? And he said, obviously, well, actually, I'll say this. Obviously, we've seen that's been a position that's been beat up for OSU lately. They had injuries this year. They had injuries last year. That's just a position on a football field that will get hurt, will get beat up. And I think Jacoby Sanders is a guy that we're talking about might be on that depth spot next year. I think he's easily a guy that can work in, get some reps. He's not going to be starting. He's probably not going to be playing, more than 15 snaps a game. But I think he is, just with the size he already has on him. He's 6'3", 305 is what he's listed at. Big kid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why he couldn't slide into a backup spot, a backup role, and kind of just get some reps in that way. So I definitely think, when we look at where the offensive line is and when we look at what he brings, I think there's clear chance he could make some plays this year.
So during the Mike Gundy press conference yesterday, anything interesting come out of that? Maybe just some highlights from that. Usually a Mike Gundy press conference has some interesting nuggets involved with it. So how did that go?
It does. I'll say this, Mike looked a little tired, and I don't blame him. He was probably up all night working away and making sure this everything recruiting was squared away, and they were about to get on an airplane and fly off to Arizona for the bowl game. They're there right now. But Mike liked to talk about, we broke down all these recruits, all these signees, and he gave us what he liked about them. And I think what he said most interesting, when we talk about we haven't mentioned him yet, Patrick, but the quarterback recruit, we have.
Yeah.
So they told me you say the last name Floors, like the floor, not Flores. So Zane Floors. Mike really spoke highly of his ability over the past 6 to 8 months to really develop a run game and develop some mobility. He was more of a pocket guy, but now he's really picked up some of that, and I think that's very interesting. Especially when we look at, like we said earlier, the quarterback group and what that's going to look like for OSU next year. He also spoke talking about recruiting and how it's changing, and he thinks there's something to be said about as this becomes a bigger and bigger deal, and those bigger schools are able to put more money into recruiting and recruiting travel. He even said, you worry about some of these smaller schools and if they're going to be able to keep up and all that. And I forget who asked him, but somebody said, "Hey, Mike, you've always enjoyed this kind of a challenge, putting the puzzle pieces together." And he said, he's not a big fan of everything that's going on right now with this recruiting and transfer portal and NIL, but at the same time, he said, you got to make the adjustments to make it work. And so I think college football is at a very interesting time, and everybody's trying to figure it out. There's no exception to that, not even Mike Gundy. I think it's moving quick, and he's trying to figure it all out.
You know what would be a really cool interview if you could get like an hour sit down one-on-one with Mike Gundy and like don't talk OSU at all, just talk big picture college football issues. Like, what is the direction of college football, recruiting, and how kids are different now, and transfer portal and budgets. And Gundy's always, I was kind of joking earlier about that, but Gundy's always very interesting on big picture stuff, and he'll talk about stuff. He'll mention the challenges of not only Oklahoma State but college football, and how it's evolving and how it's changing, and he's been around long enough now to have seen how college football it's changed. I just think it'd be fascinating to sit down with him and just say, like, Coach, we're not going to talk about Oklahoma State. We're going to talk about college football in general as a whole. Like, where do you see it going? I mean, I just think that'd be so fascinating.
I think so. And really, if you think about it, Mike Gundy is one of, I guess, 3 coaches who can say, I've been at one school in one position for almost 2 decades. I think there's only 2 other coaches that can say that, really, in Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, and Utah, Kyle Whittingham.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Gundy, they've all been in their current position for 18 plus years now. And so they get to watch this landscape evolve, not while they're bouncing around other schools and different cultures. They're watching it evolve in the culture they've built for almost 2 decades.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, all right, let's leave it there. So the bowl game is what, Tuesday? Is that right? When is it?
27th. Today is Thursday. Yep.
Okay. The holidays always get me a little mixed up on days of the week. So, all right. So actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but you won't be going to the bowl game. That'll still be Kelly Hines.
Yep.
So look for her coverage. And so Dean and I will be coming at you once a week. We'll figure out what day, but we'll get together next week, Dean, and talk a little bowl game. And happy holidays to you and your family.
Happy holidays to you, Patrick. Appreciate everybody listening.
Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.